Good evening, friends. Today, I am immensely pleased to interact with you on the given topic admissions in criminal law and die declarations. Now, before I proceed to give my lecture, I don't think that it is a lecture, but I think that it is the only interaction of sharing my views with you and thereby learning something from your end also. And before I do going to lecture, I thank the Mayawadi Parishad of Telangana Unit and its Secretary Mr. Sunil Samsani for providing me with this opportunity of interacting with you on the subject. Now, as a practicing advocate, it is very necessary for us to know the impact of admissions in criminal law and as well as the impact of die declaration in criminal trials. We all know that unlike in civil law, the criminal law requires from the prosecution side to prove the offence beyond all reasonable doubt. So in civil law, it is only preponderance of probability one has to establish, but whereas when it comes to criminal law, the prosecution is obliged to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. So in this process, if some protections are not given to accused, the very purpose of the protections provided under Indian Constitution as well as in under other statutes would be defeated. Therefore, we have to understand the protection that is available to accused in various criminal laws, more particularly in Indian Evidence Act, Criminal Procedure Code, and so on and so forth. Friends, if the accused is not provided with any safeguards, you can imagine the havoc that may be created by the investigating officers. Why I am telling this is, these sections which now we are going to deal with, that is admissions under Indian Evidence Act, is not simply drafted in the Indian Evidence Act, but it has got its roots in the Indian Constitution, provisions of Indian Constitution. You are all aware, Article 20, Subclause 3 provides protection against self-incrimination, rather testimonial compulsion. In popularly we know that it is a testimonial compulsion. That means Article 20, Subclause 3 provides that the accused cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself. That is what the purport of Article 20, Subclause 3 of Indian Constitution. Therefore, the Indian Constitution is given the protection to the accused, and in the line of that Article 20, Subclause 3, the provisions of Section 17 to 24 of Indian Evidence Act are incorporated. Now, as far as admissions are concerned, they are provided under Section 17 to Section 31, 32 of Indian Evidence, 31 of Indian Evidence Act, under Chapter 2 of Indian Evidence Act. Now again the sections are divided into two parts. We can conveniently divide these sections 17 to section 31 into two parts, and one part of sections are from 17 to 23 called as admissions, and sections 24 to section 31 are called as confessions. Now as far as admissions are concerned, we are all aware in criminal law, admissions made by an accused cannot be used against him. Now, so far as confessions which are contained in section 24 to section 31 of Indian Evidence Act, they are most relevant and important for the purpose of, for the point of view of a practicing advocate. Because normally in every day, in every criminal trial, we find across the confession Panchanama and recovery Panchanama, and we have to understand that what is a confession and what impact it will have on a criminal trail in proving the offence against the accused. Now, as a general rule, confession we deal in the criminal law, the confessions are not admissible unless they partake certain qualities of being admissible in evidence. Now, section 24 to section 31 deal with this kind of confessions. Now, coming to section 24 of Indian Evidence Act, section 24 says that confession caused by any inducement, threat or promise is irrelevant in criminal proceedings. That means if a confession appears to the court is caused by a person in authority, making the accused to believe that the confession, by making such confession, the accused has a reason to believe that he would gain some advantage or that he would avoid any evil of temporal nature. If in such circumstances the accused goes on making a confession, the law recognizes under section 24 that such confessions, since they were caused by inducement, threat or promise, they are irrelevant in criminal proceedings and they are no more applicable in proving the case against the accused. But here there are certain exceptions to this general rule contained in section 24, because we know that there is a section in section 24 itself. Normally the popularly known confession we come across in criminal trials is the extrajudicial confession. Extrajudicial confession is a confession made not before a magistrate but before a person in whom the accused reposes confidence, and the accused voluntarily goes to him and seek his help, and in that process he makes a confession of committing an offence. Such confessions are called as extrajudicial confessions, and sometimes they are made applicable in criminal trials, but you should remember that the legal position as on today, the settled position of law is that extrajudicial confessions, though at sometimes they are admissible in evidence, but they are very weak kind of evidence. They cannot be called as a substantive evidence, but they are only a corroborative piece of evidence, and on the extrajudicial confession alone, seldom we find the cases ending in convictions. So section 24 extrajudicial confession is an exception to general rule of section 24, which says that any confession caused by inducement, threat or promise is irrelevant in criminal proceedings. Now, before going to another section, section 25, I would like to give two cases, case law for you to proper understanding of section 24. Now, we find a case in the AR 2010 Supreme Court page 1974, which says that the protection against self-incrimination contained in section 24 is applicable even from the stage of investigation. That means the purport of this judgment AR 2010 Supreme Court page 1974 is that not only at the stage of trial or inquiry this protection is available to the accused, but this protection under section 24 is available to the accused even from the stage of investigation. So this we have to bear in mind. And another judgment reported in 2012 Supreme Court page 1552, and in this judgment what the Supreme Court has held, that in case where the FIR is registered on the strength of a statement made by the accused, and subsequently the person lodging the complaint found to be the accused in this case, the question arose before the Supreme Court is whether such a confession contained in the shape of a complaint lodged by the accused can be treated as a confession against him. Now, Supreme Court, taking recourse to section 24 of Indian Evidence Act, held that such part of confession contained in the shape of a complaint lodged by the accused, who subsequently turned out to be the accused, cannot be used against him as a confession. This is the purport of the judgment reported in AR 2012 Supreme Court page 1552. Now, Let us go to the next section, that is section 25. Section 25 says confessions to police not to be proved. This is a simple section which says that confessions to police not to be proved. That means, Your Honor, that means, my friends, any confession made by accused before police or to the police, they are simply inadmissible. And normally we do come across in many cases where the police will simply record a confession panchanama without anything further. That means without discovering any fact, without recovery of any incriminating article, they just simply record confession panchanama, oppukolu panchanama. Normally in Telugu we come across that oppukolu panchanama. So section 25 is squarely applicable to that part of confessions. They are mere confessions and they fall squarely under section 25, and by virtue of section 25 of Indian Evidence Act, they are simply inadmissible in evidence, that they cannot be admitted in evidence, they cannot be taken aid of in proving the offence against the accused. But unfortunately, we see in many courts that most of the time of the honorable courts are being wasted in persisting by the APPOs or public prosecutors to mark such confessions which are of no use in the evidence in view of section 25 of the Indian Evidence Act. So section 25 says confessions to police not to be proved. That means any confession made to police, they are simply not admissible in evidence. They cannot be proved in proving a case against the accused. Now these are section 24 and section 25. Now section 26 says confessions made to police while in the custody of police not to be proved. They are irrelevant and they are inadmissible in evidence. Confessions made while in the custody of police not to be proved against the maker. This is what the purport of section 27 of 26 of Indian Evidence Act. So unlike in section 25, where it provides that confession to police not to be proved against the maker, here the distinguishable fact from 25 to 26 is, here the person will be in the custody of police while making the confession. So section 26 comes into play when a confession is made by an accused while in the custody of police, and such admissions are not to be proved against the maker of it. So therefore, while in the custody of police, any confession is made by the accused, that is inadmissible evidence, except in one case where such confession is made in the immediate presence of the magistrate, in the immediate presence of a magistrate. So here we come across the provisions of section 164 of CRPC, where the magistrates are enjoined with the power to record confessional statements of accused persons by taking all precautions because section 164 gives power to magistrate to record the confession statement of an accused, and section 164 provides lot of precautions in providing the recording of confession. Before recording the confession of an accused, the magistrate has to first verify whether the accused was under any compulsion, threat or promise or inducement, and whether he is willing to make a statement, and the magistrate has to explain the accused that he is under no obligation to make any confession, and still if you want to make a confession, it will be used against him in the course of trial, and it is only after satisfying that the accused, even after explaining the possibility of the confession being used against him, the magistrate will proceed on to record the confession. And even after recording the confession, the magistrate has to explain and read out the confession made to him, and he has to obtain the signature. And so many precautions are provided for recording confession under section 164. Even if magistrate thinks that it is necessary to give some time to accused for reflection, he may refuse to record the confession on the date fixed, and he may go on recording the statement on the next day or the other day. So this is 164. So that means section 26 says the confession made while in the custody of police not to be proved against the maker unless the confession is recorded in the immediate presence of the magistrate. So therefore, my friends, section 26 is also giving a protection to the confessions made by accused using against him. Now let us come to the all important section, section 27 of Indian Evidence Act. Now section 27, we should understand that section 27 is an exception to section 25 and section 26. As we all know, section 25 and 26 prohibits the using of confessions made by the accused made before police or while in the custody of police being used against the accused. Whereas section 27 gives an exception to section 25 and section 26, and it provides that the confession so made by the accused falling within the purview of section 27 can be used against the accused provided certain circumstances exist in the confession. Now section 27 says how much of information received from accused may be proved. So section 27 says how much of information received from the accused may be proved. Now section 27 says when any fact is deposed, as discovered in consequence of information received from a person accused of a case in the custody of police, so much of such information relating distinctly to the discovery of any fact may be proved. So again I will read the section 27. It says that when any fact is deposed to has discovered in consequence of information received from a person accused of a crime in the custody of police, so much of such information relating distinctly to the discovery of a fact may be proved. That means, let us take an example. If in a murder case, accused is arrested and he is being interrogated in the presence of two mediators. Now, while in the process of mediators questioning him as to why he is in the police custody, as to when he is arrested and so on and so forth. And if the person makes a confession that I killed my wife yesterday in the jungle and I have, by beating her with an axe, and I have thrown the axe into bushes and I have left the dead body of my wife in the jungle, and if you come with me, I will show the place where I have hidden my axe and the place where my wife's dead body is lying in the jungle. Now, if this is the confession, now the part of confession that he killed his wife is not admissible in view of section 25 and section 26. But the part of confession where the accused tells the punch witnesses and the police that if they follow him, he will show the place where he has hidden his axe and the place where his wife's dead body is lying. And he, in pursuance to such confession, he leads the police and the punch witnesses to the set places where the axe is hidden and where the dead body is lying. Now, such part of confession is admissible under section 27 because in consequence to the information given by the accused, the police have discovered the place where the axe is hidden and the place where the dead body is found. Now, this is again decided in a judgment reported in AAR 2013 Supreme Court, AAR 2013 Supreme Court, page 3013. Now, so section 27 is nothing but an exception to the prohibition contained in section 25 and 26 of Indian Evidence Act. Now, the distinction we have to understand. In section 25 and 26, there won't be any discovery of any fact or incriminating article in pursuance to the confession made by the accused, because in 25 and 26 there will be only mere confessions. So therefore they are not made applicable in the evidence. Now, whereas coming to section 27, here in pursuance to the information furnished by the accused, leading to the discovery of a fact, whether it may be incriminating article or a dead body itself, then such part of confession leading to the discovery of a fact is made admissible under section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act. Now, friends, let us assume where in relation to section 27, let us assume a case where, I'll just give one example, where a patrolling party goes on patrolling duty and while patrolling near a public place, a busy market area, they found 3 persons moving in under suspicious circumstances. Now immediately the police party catches them and the police, the sub-inspector of police, let us presume, that he inquires with the persons as to who are they, where from they come and why they are moving there, and if the culprits say that they are so and so and they came from so and so place and they came there to circulate the fake currency, and if the police officers ask them where is the fake currency, if they show the fake currency from their bag, taking it out from their bag, and then the police officer calls the punch witnesses and conduct a panchanama. Now in that case, it is nothing but rediscovering a fact which is already discovered, because before calling punch witnesses, the police officer knew as to what incriminating article the persons are carrying, where they are carrying, and what is that incriminating article, that is fake currency. And before calling panchas, all these facts are within the knowledge of the police officer. So it amounts to discovery of a fact which is already discovered. So law says only the discovery should be in pursuance to the information made by the informant, and that information should be furnished before the 2 independent witnesses. If after information discovery is made, then it is admissible under section 27. But before calling punch witnesses, here what happened, here the police personnel knew where the incriminating article is and they have seen the incriminating articles before calling the panchas. Now here, my friends, there is a direct judgment on this on this aspect, that a discovery which is already made cannot be rediscovered. This is the case reported in AAR 1997 part 6 page 171. That a fact already discovered cannot be rediscovered. AAR 1977 part 6 Supreme Court cases page 171. Now with regard to the requirements of applicability of section 27, we have 2008 part 3 Supreme Court cases page 210. 2008 part 3 Supreme Court cases page 210. Now if in pursuant to the information, if a recovery is made from a open place which is accessible to others, now in such cases will be dealt differently by courts. Now the settled position of law is that if a discovery is made from open place which is accessible to one and all, such discoveries have to be viewed with suspicion and circumspect, and before accepting such confessions, the courts have to be on guard to ensure that such confession and discovery are genuine and not fabricated. Now, this is dealt in a case reported in AAR 2013, Supreme Court, page 3349, page 3349. So, friends, this is all about section 24 to section 27 of Indian Evidence Act, which deals with confessions. And to sum up section 24 to 27, section 24 says any confession caused by inducement, threat or promise is irrelevant and inadmissible against the accused. Section 25 says confession made before police cannot be used against the maker. 26 says confession made to police while in the custody cannot be proved against the maker. Section 27 says so much of information received from the accused may be proved. That means if any evidence is led that accused gave some information, and in pursuance of such information he leads the police and the punch witnesses and there discovers a incriminating article or incriminating thing, such part of evidence can be used against the accused. Now this is all about section 24 to section 27 of Indian Evidence Act, because every day and we come across this problem in criminal trials, because as a defense advocates we need to know very clearly about these provisions and their impact. That is section 24 to 27. Now let us move on to the important topic of this evening, that is dying declarations. Now the essential feature of a dying declaration and specific future of dying declaration is, it is by words we can understand, it is the declaration made by a dead person. That is a declaration made by a dead person. That means that the person who made that declaration will not be available for the defense for cross-examination. The person who made the declaration will not be available for the defense counsel to cross-examine. Now, if this kind of evidence is admitted in evidence, where the defense is not able to cross-examine the witness to test the veracity of the declaration, in such cases, lot of prejudice may be caused to the accused. Therefore, Indian Evidence Act provides under section 32 certain safeguards and certain requirements for making a declaration a valid declaration. Now, to understand in a plain language what is dying declaration means, a dying declaration is a statement made by a declarant. A dying declaration is a statement made by a declarant either in writing or oral, who is unable to testify in the court, who made the statement under belief of death, explaining the cause of his death, or circumstances resulting in his death. So this is the plain meaning of dying declaration under section 32 of Indian Evidence Act. I will repeat again. A dying declaration is a statement made either in writing or verbal, who is unable to testify in the court, who made the statement under belief of death, and explaining the cause of his death or circumstances resulting in his death. Now, by knowing this, what are the ingredients of dying declaration is that the person making the declaration must make a declaration regarding cause of his death or circumstances resulting in his death, and the person making the declaration must not be available to testify himself in the court. And if such statement is made by any person who is unable to testify in the court and who gave declaration explaining the cause of his death or circumstances resulting in his death, such declarations are called as dying declarations. Now, why so much of importance is given to dying declaration? Because often we found that only on the basis of dying declarations convictions are awarded to accused without any corroboration from any other independent source. Because since if the dying declaration is found to be reliable, truthful and genuine, convictions are based on the sole basis of a dying declaration without any corroboration. So that is the importance given to dying declaration. And why so much of importance is given to dying declarations under section 32 of Indian Evidence Act is that it is based upon some general principles, general beliefs that a person who is going to die will not lie. A person who is going to die will not lie. And another general belief that is prompted in drafting section 32 is that truth sits on the lips of a dying person. Truth sits on the lips of a dying person. So based on these general principles, the declarations made by persons who are no more available for defense to cross-examine are made applicable under section 32 of Indian Evidence Act. Now, by following this, we can understand that generally law recognizes exclusion of hearsay evidence. You all know hearsay evidence is not admissible in law. But section 32 in the shape of Dine Declaration is an exception to the rule of exclusion of hearsay evidence. So it is an exception to the rule of exclusion of hearsay evidence. Why? Because here the Dine Declarations are sought to be proved in court of law by the persons who wrote the Dine Declarations or by the persons who heard the declarations made by the deceased. Now it becomes hearsay evidence. In practical, it becomes hearsay evidence. But still, as an exceptions to the hearsay evidence, which I already said before you, that Dine Declarations are made applicable and sometimes they form the basis for conviction. So this is with regard to section 32. Now, section 32 of Indian Evidence Act says that admissibility of evidence in the matter of relevancy of statements, admissibility of evidence in the matter of relevancy of statements made by persons who are dead or cannot be found and whose presence cannot be procured without unreasonable amount of delay and expenses, and under the opinion of the court is unreasonable, is relevant. This is what section 32 says. That means admissibility of evidence of relevancy of statements made by persons who are dead or cannot be found or who became incapable of giving evidence or whose presence cannot be procured without unreasonable delay and expenses, and which under the opinion of the court is unreasonable, they are relevant. So that means to become a Dine Declaration, there are certain ingredients which have to be established. That is, the person who gave the declaration must not be alive. He should be dead. He must not be alive. That is the first ingredient. Second ingredient is he cannot be found. If either he cannot be found or he must become incapable of giving evidence. That means if after giving declaration, if he is paralyzed and he is unable to speak, in such case also it can be treated as under section 32. And his presence cannot be procured without any amount of delay and expense, which the court should feel as unreasonable, and in such cases relevant. The statements made under section 32 relevant. Therefore, section 32, we must understand section 32 does not deal with Dine Declaration alone. It deals with different circumstances under which statements made in different circumstances are made available. Because first circumstance is that the declarant should be no more, he should die. And second circumstance is he cannot be found. Under those circumstances also, the evidence under section 32 is applicable. That means I want to clear any confusion in your mind by saying that section 32 Indian Evidence Act does not deal with the Dine Declaration alone. Rather, it deals with 8 circumstances provided therein, that they are first circumstances that the declarant should be no more. The second circumstance is not available for the prosecution to examine and he is incapacitated in any way in giving evidence, or whose presence cannot be found without unreasonable delay and expense. So these are all the 8 circumstances provided under section 32 for admitting the evidence, provided they fall under those particular circumstances. Now, as far as Dine Declaration is concerned, subclass 1 of section 32 deals with Dine Declaration. Only subclass 1 of section 32 deals with Dine Declaration. You have to bear it in mind. So, what section 32 subclass 1 says? It says that when the statement is made by a person, as to cause of his death, or as to circumstances resulting in his death, and such person's death comes into question, and when such person's death comes into question, such statements are treated as a dying declaration, whether the person making was or was not under expectation of death, and such person's death comes into question, is relevant as a dying declaration. This is what section 32 subclause 1 says. Now here, by reading section 32 subclause 1, 3-4 important aspects are to be noted. The first aspect is that the person who making the statement must die thereafter and not available for the prosecution to testify in the court. And second thing is that it is immaterial whether the person making the statement is or was under expectation of death or was not under expectation of death. And the third ingredient is such person's death must be in question in that particular case. When all these ingredients are satisfied, then such declaration assumes the characteristics of a dying declaration. Now, here we have to note some two important, differentiating aspects from Indian law to English law. Now, in Indian law, the declarant must not be under the expectation of death. He may not be under expectation of death. But whereas when you go to English law, declarant must be necessarily under expectation of death. Then only such declaration will be termed as dying declaration. Here in India, in whatever case the death of that person comes into question, it will be treated as a dying declaration, whatever nature of the case. For example, in India, we come across dying declarations in cases of murders, section 302 IPC, in cases of suicide, section 306 IPC, and in cases of dowry test, section 304B IPC. But whereas it comes to English law, it applies, dying declarations applies only in cases of manslaughter. Manslaughter means that is murder. So this is the difference between the English law and Indian law. In Indian law, the person need not be under expectation of death, but he should die afterwards, and such person's death must be in question of that particular case. And whatever may be the nature of the case, dying declarations are admissible. This is the distinction between the Indian law as well as the English law. Now we have understood what is dying declaration, what is the definition of dying declaration. If I am confident that by this time you might have understood, because we are all practicing advocates. No, I don't want to burden you much on this topic, because once we know the definition of dying declaration and the importance of dying declaration, the nature of the dying declaration and the evidentiary value of the dying declaration, now let us see what kinds of dying declarations will be there normally in criminal trials. And to say dying declarations may be either written, as already said, either oral, or sometimes dying declarations may be based upon gestures and signs. And sometimes dying declarations will be in the shape of a suicide note or death note. Now, before we go deep into the subject, I like to give you certain old case law and which are very landmark judgments on this aspect. The first case we take is the famous case of Pakala Narayanaswamy versus Emperor. In this case, the murder took place in the year 1937 and the case was decided by Privy Council in the year 1939. So, Pakala Narayanaswamy versus Emperor is the classic case and a landmark judgment on section 32 of Indian Evidence Act. In this case, the brief facts are that In this case, the deceased has lent some amount to the accused, Pakala Narayan Swami, that is 3,000 rupees on 18% interest. And this Pakala Narayan Swami stays in Berhampur village, Berhampur town, and after repeated demands, one day the wife of accused, Pakala Narayan Swami, wrote a letter to the deceased to come to Berhampur and collect the due amount. And after receiving that letter, the deceased, while proceeding to Berhampur, he handed over the letter to his wife and informs her that he is going to Berhampur for receiving the due amount from the accused, and so saying he left the house. And on the third day, the deceased body was cut into pieces and found in a trunk in a compartment in Puri railway station. And after this, the case is booked against Pakala Narayan Swami, and during trial, the wife of the deceased testified before the court that her husband, before proceeding to Berhampur, has handed over the letter written by the wife of the accused, asking her husband to come to Berhampur for collecting the due amount, and so saying, her husband left the house and thereafter found as a dead person, his body cut into 7 pieces and kept in a trunk. And the court, the Privy Council held that such part of information, that is the information given by the deceased to his wife before proceeding to Berhampur, that the wife of accused has written a letter asking him to come to Berhampur for collecting rent. And thereafter the deceased leaving the house. And another fact which is proved during trial, that the box in which the dead body of the deceased was found, in fact purchased by the accused one day prior to the commission of murder. So basing on all these facts, what the Privy Council has observed, that the information given by the deceased to his wife, that he has received a letter from the wife of accused asking him to come to Berhampur for collecting the due amount, and such information is treated as a dying declaration in this case under Section 32 of Indian Evidence Act. And by deciding that, the Privy Council convicted the accused Pakala Narayan Swami. So this is the classic case under Section 32 of Indian Evidence Act, which is landmark judgment. So friends, after this, I have already said, the dying declaration at sometimes may be based upon the gestures and signs. It need not always be in writing or in verbal. Sometimes by virtue of receiving injury, the declarant or rather the victim may not be in a position to speak. Suppose if the injury is caused to the neck, deep injury is caused to the neck, sometimes vocal cords will be cut, and in that position the declarant may not be in a position to give any declaration. Still, in such cases, the declaration can be recorded with the aid of interpreter or educator by the magistrate or by any person for that matter, by following the gestures and signs. In such cases, the law recognizes the declaration so recorded by following the gestures and signs as admissible as dying declaration under Section 32 of Indian Evidence Act. Now, the classic case and landmark judgment on this is Queen versus Abdullah. Queen versus Abdullah. And this is again a decision given by the Privy Council way back in the year 1940. The Queen versus Abdullah. Here in this case, what happened? The accused slit the throat of the victim with a knife. The accused slit the throat of the victim with a knife, thereby making the victim incapable to give any statement, incapable to speak. So in such circumstances, the dying declaration is recorded by following the gestures and signs, and the Privy Council upheld the dying declaration so recorded by following the gestures and signs and convicted the accused. Now, with regard to the contemporary case where the dying declaration is recorded by following the gestures and signs in case of persons who are incapable of speaking, the contemporary case we come across is 2009 Part 2, Supreme Court Cases Criminal, page 850. So 2009 Part 2, Supreme Court Cases Criminal, page 850, 850. In this case, what happened? The declaration of a dumb witness is recorded by magistrate by following her gestures and signs. The declaration was sought to be attacked on the ground that the declarant is not only dumb but also deaf. Therefore, whatever she stated with the help of gestures and signs cannot be taken as a declaration, and the trial court has grossly erred in convicting the accused. But ultimately, the Supreme Court said that there is no evidence that the declarant is deaf, but of course the declarant is dumb as per medical evidence also. But the declaration was recorded by following the gestures and signs with the help of a interpreter or educator. Therefore, there is nothing wrong in recording the declaration, and the declaration found to be genuine and inspire confidence. Therefore, the Supreme Court held the declaration reliable and convicted the accused. So, this is with regard to the declarations recorded by gestures with the help of gestures and signs. Now, as already told you, that declarations will be either writing or verbal or by gestures and signs, and suicide notes also. Suicide notes, and they are also popularly called as death notes. Now, these kind of declarations confront with a lot of difficulty for defense advocates to overcome them. Normally, these kind of suicide notes are free fabrication of investigating officers. Whenever they do not find any satisfactory evidence to implicate the accused, normally they prepare these kind of suicide notes, and with the help of suicide notes, they implicate the accused. And these suicide notes normally we find written on a piece of paper, or in a diary, or in a notebook, or even on the walls of the house also. Suicide notes, sometimes we find suicide notes or death notes written by the deceased. Now again, when there is suicide note, before making the suicide note acceptable in evidence under section 32, the prosecution is under obligation to prove that the writings in the suicide note are made by the deceased and the deceased alone. Unless the writings in the suicide note are proved to be in the handwriting of the deceased, normally suicide notes will be disbelieved. So these are the kinds of dying declarations. Now we come to the next aspect of the matter, is that who are competent to record dying declarations. Section 32 as it is does not provide any embargo as to who has to record dying declarations. That means section 32 is very clear. Any person can record dying declaration, written dying declaration. And apart from any person, normally we come across dying declaration recorded by doctors, police officers and magistrates. And seldom we find doctors and police officers recording dying declarations. Why? Because the law recognizes the dying declarations recorded by magistrates to be more genuine and more acceptable than when compared to the dying declarations recorded by doctors and police personnel. We normally find that police personnel, in their anxiety to procure convictions, they often resort to introducing dying declarations in the shape of either a complaint or in the shape of 161 CRPC statement. And this offers great difficulty for defense advocates to wriggle out of these dying declarations. Now, this is the normal practice. That is the reason why the apex, right from apex court to various high courts, held that the practice of doctors and police officials recording the dying declaration should be discouraged. It is not that their declarations recorded by doctors and police officials are totally inadmissible, but the law says that court has to be on guard before accepting the dying declarations recorded by doctors and police officials when compared to the dying declarations recorded by a magistrate. So with this background, let us take few cases where doctors have recorded dying declaration and what is the viewpoint of apex court. Why I am giving the apex court judgments is, you all know the law laid down by the apex court is binding on the subordinate courts. It is the law of the land. So therefore, as far as practicable, I am trying to give the judgments of apex court so that normally it will be treated as a law of the land and a legal position as on today. So when we come to dying declaration recorded by a doctor, we find a case reported in 1995 Criminal Law Journal, page 3630. 1995 Criminal Law Journal, page 3630, 3630. This is a case relating to Swaran Singh versus State of Punjab. Swaran Singh versus State of Punjab. Now, in this case, the facts in brief are that the declarant, that is the victim, was brought to the hospital in a precarious condition. The victim was brought to the hospital in a precarious condition, and after admitting, his condition was fast deteriorating. His condition was fast deteriorating, and relatives of the victim was not available in the hospital. Relatives of the victim were not available in the hospital, and there was no time to call a magistrate for recording dying declaration, and there was no time to call a magistrate for recording a dying declaration. Under those compelling circumstances, in that particular case, doctor ventured to record dying declaration in the presence of a head constable. Doctor ventured to record a dying declaration in the presence of a head constable. And doctor has not obtained any certificate of mental fitness of the declarant to give a statement. But still, what the Supreme Court held is that the dying declaration so recorded by the doctor is admissible in evidence in the light of the facts of that particular case. In the light of the facts of that particular case, what are the facts available in that case? The relatives were not available. The patient was brought to hospital in a precarious condition, and after admission, his condition was fast deteriorating, and there was no time to call a magistrate so as to get his statement recorded by a magistrate. So under those compelling circumstances, since doctor recorded the dying declaration, and since the declaration found to be truthful and inspiring confidence of the court, what the Supreme Court said, in spite of the lacunas of not obtaining doctor's certificate and not calling the magistrate to record the dying declaration, still the declaration so recorded by the doctor found to be admissible, and on that basis the Supreme Court upheld the conviction imposed against the accused. So this is one judgment reported in 1995 Criminal Law Journal, page 3630, where doctor's dying declaration was appreciated by the Supreme Court. Now coming to a contra judgment, because I already said no judgment, no on basis of any particular judgment, dying declarations can be discarded or admitted. Each case has to be decided on the merits of particular facts prevailing in that particular case. So a contra judgment I would like to give, which is reported in 1997 Part 7 Criminal Law Journal, page 461, 1997 Part 7 Criminal Law Journal, page 461. Here what happened in this case, there was a oral declaration made by the victim to his mother and sister. There was an oral declaration made by the victim to his mother and sister, and simultaneously doctor also recorded the dying declaration. Doctor also recorded the dying declaration, and the trial court, relying on both oral and documentary written declaration recorded by the doctor, convicted the accused. The trial court convicted the accused, finding reliance on both oral declaration as well as the written declaration recorded by the doctor. But in the appeal, the High Court reversed the judgment. But in the appeal, the High Court reversed the judgment, and when ultimately the matter went up to Apex Court, that is Honorable Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upheld the judgment of High Court in acquitting the accused, mainly basing on two aspects. The one aspect is that there is no certification made by the doctor regarding the fitness of the declarant to be in a position to give a statement. And the second and most important aspect which weighed with the Supreme Court in discarding the die declaration is that 15 minutes thereafter recording the die declaration, soon after 15 minutes, within 15 minutes after recording the die declaration, the victim succumbed to the injuries. So therefore the Supreme Court opined that within 15 minutes after recording die declaration, the deceased died. Therefore, the deceased may not be in a fit state of mind to give a truthful and voluntary declaration, and more particularly since there is no certification made by the doctor. Therefore, Supreme Court disbelieved the evidence, both oral dying declaration and a dying declaration recorded by the doctor, and ultimately acquitted the accused and upheld the judgment rendered by the High Court. So these are the two judgments running contrary to each other, where the doctor's declaration is admitted in one case, where the doctor's declaration is disbelieved in another case. So you have to gather from these two judgments that the circumstances play a most vital role in accepting the die declaration or in rejecting the die declaration. But one thing we have to make sure that die declaration can be recorded by doctors. It is not as though the die declaration recorded by doctors are altogether inadmissible in evidence. So it depends upon the facts appearing in each case. Now coming to die declaration recorded by police, as already said before you, the police are frequently in the habit of introducing die declarations either in the shape of complaints or in the shape of 161 CRPC statements, and make use of them as die declarations to seek conviction of an accused. So here the police, the general proposition of law is that though it is not impermissible for a police official to record a die declaration, but what the Supreme Court has time and again said, that the recording of declarations by police should normally be discouraged, and such die declaration will have to pass the test of scrutiny of legal of the courts of law. Now here again I just refer a judgment reported in AAR 1995 Supreme Court page 777, AAR 1995 Supreme Court page 777, pertaining to C.H. Shankar Rao versus State of AP, Public Prosecutor, State of AP. C.H. Shankar Rao, State of AP, Public Prosecutor, represented by Public Prosecutor. So in this case, what happened? The head constable recorded the die declaration. The head constable, while the declarant or victim was in the hospital, he recorded the die declaration in the shape of a 161 CRPC statement. In this case, the trial court did not rely on the die declaration and acquitted the accused. The trial court did not rely on the die declaration and acquitted the accused. But when the matter carried by the state in appeal, the High Court reversed the judgment of the trial court and convicted the accused on the basis of the die declaration recorded by the head constable. And when the matter went further in appeal before the apex court, the apex court also confirmed the judgment passed by the High Court. The apex court confirmed the judgment passed by the High Court, and it admitted the die declaration recorded by the head constable. And the reasons given by the Supreme Court for accepting the die declaration recorded by the head constable is that there is evidence of doctor on record that a serious attempt was made to procure the presence of a magistrate, but magistrate was not available. A serious attempt was made to procure the presence of magistrate, but magistrate was not available. So in those compelling circumstances, the head constable proceeded to record the die declaration, and since the die declaration did not suffer from any infirmities, so therefore Supreme Court held that there is nothing wrong in the declaration recorded by the head constable, and it can form the basis of conviction. So the Supreme Court has upheld the conviction rendered by the Honorable High Court. So this is one judgment which is relating to the die declaration recorded by the police personnel. Now let us examine another case reported in AAR 1976 Supreme Court, AAR 1976 Supreme Court, page 2199. AR 1976, Supreme Court, page 2199. The case pertaining to Munna Raj versus State of MP. Munna Raj versus State of MP. Now, in this case, there are three declarations made by the victim. And oral declaration was made by the declarant soon after the incident. Oral declaration is made by the declarant soon after the incident. And the second declaration is made before the SI of police. The second declaration made before SI of police when the victim was taken to police station, and on the basis of the statement of the victim, the police registered the FIR. On the basis of the victim, the police registered the FIR. And the third declaration of the victim is recorded while she was in the hospital by head constable. The third declaration was recorded in the hospital by head constable while she was in the hospital. Now, the three declarations come for question, and the trial court acquitted the accused, disbelieving all the three declarations, whereas the High Court reversed the finding of the trial court and convicted the accused, basing on the second declaration recorded by SI of police when the victim was taken to police station, and on the basis of such statement the FIR is registered. Relying on such FIR, treating it as a dying declaration, the High Court has convicted the accused, and when the matter further went up in appeal, the Supreme Court concurred with the finding given by the High Court. The Supreme Court concurred with the finding given by the High Court, holding that the statement recorded by SI of police when the victim was taken to police and on the basis of which FIR is registered, it can be treated as a dying declaration in view of the death of the deceased subsequent to the registration of FIR. So therefore, the FIR assumes the characteristics of a dying declaration, and therefore the Supreme Court concurred with the finding of the High Court and held that such a FIR can be treated as a dying declaration, and on that basis the conviction can be awarded to the accused. So this is another judgment reported in AR 1976, Supreme Court, page 2199. Now let us examine another case, a different scenario reported in AR 2013 Supreme Court, AR 2013 Supreme Court, page 2272. Page 2272, a case relating to Rafiq versus State of UP. A case relating to Rafiq versus State of UP. In this case, the main point to understood is that the Supreme Court gave a clarification on a legal aspect. The Supreme Court gave a clarification on legal aspect, because till then there was a lot of confusion whether the statements of witnesses recorded under section 161 CRPC, and subsequently if that witness dies, what is the fate of that 161 CRPC statement? Whether can it be treated as a dying declaration, or can it be treated as a statement, and so that it can be confronted under section 157 of CRPC or under section 145 of CRPC. So the Supreme Court clarified the legal position on this aspect, holding that if a person's statement is recorded under section 161 CRPC, and if that person dies subsequently due to the injuries sustained by him in that incident pertaining to that particular case, then such 161 CRPC statement or such FIR on the basis of which statement the FIR is issued, they can be treated as a dying declaration under section 32 of Indian Evidence Act, and they can be admitted in evidence as a dying declarations. Now let us assume where in a case, suppose if a 161 CRPC statement is made by a person, and subsequently after 1 year or 6 months, such person dies due to some other reason, not because of the injuries sustained in the incident, but because of some other incident, some other reasons, say for example due to heart attack or due to cancer, and etc. etc. Whether such 161 statement can be treated as a dying declaration. The law is very clear that the death must be due to relating to the particular case only. If death is otherwise caused, such statements cannot be treated as dying declarations. And even in other cases where the declarant is alive, So such treatments cannot be treated as die declarations, and they can be only treated as statements, and they can be used to contradict or corroborate the maker of it under section 157 CRPC as the previous statement under section 145 CRPC. So this is the legal position that is clarified by the Supreme Court in AR 2013 Supreme Court page 2277, 2272. So this is another angle to the die declaration. Now in case reported in K. Ramchandra Reddy versus the public prosecutor, the High Court also held that FIR registered on the basis of a statement of the victim and the victim later dies, such FIRs can be treated as die declaration. This is also in line with the judgment of Supreme Court. Just now I said that is AR 2013 Supreme Court 2272 and AR 1976 Supreme Court page 2199. So K. Ramchandra Reddy versus public prosecutor case is also in the line where the FIR given by the deceased on the basis of which the FIR is registered and subsequently the such person died, the FIR can be treated as a die declaration. This is with regard to the FIR being treated as a dying declaration. Now we come to the important aspect of dying declarations recorded by magistrates. Now we also discussed earlier that normally declarations recorded by magistrates will assume more credence and priority than that of recorded by doctors and police officers. Now in view of this matter, let us take a decision of our own High Court of AP reported in AR 1997 Part 1 ALD Criminal, 1997 Part 1 ALD Criminal, page 577, 1997 Part 1 ALD Criminal, page 577. This case arising from out of the judgment rendered by Learned Session Judge Khammam. In this case, what happened? Madura police has registered a case against husband for killing his second wife by cutting her throat. And when the victim was in the hospital on requisition, the learned magistrate went to the hospital and recorded the die declaration, and the trial court, that is Sessions Court Khammam, relying on the die declaration recorded by the magistrate, convicted the accused for the offence punishable under section 302 IPC and sentenced him to life imprisonment. And when the matter went in appeal, the counsel for the appellant vehemently argued before the appellate court that the doctor who has appended his certificate that the declarant is fit and conscious and coherent to give statement was not examined before the trial court. So therefore, there is no evidence with regard to the mental fitness of the declarant to give statement, and therefore the trial court grossly erred in relying on the die declaration and convicting the accused. Therefore, the advocate for appellant sought the intervention of the High Court in reversing the judgment of trial court. But repelling the contentions raised by the counsel for the appellant, the High Court held that in that case the doctor's certificate was there, but merely because the doctor was not examined, it would not vitiate the proceedings of die declaration. When the evidence of magistrate is very clear and cogent that he has satisfied himself about the fitness of the declarant by putting some questions and obtaining some answers from the victim, and in that case what the High Court found, there is corroboration from other sources with regard to the fitness of the declarant. Therefore, the High Court refused to intervene, and the High Court held that the judgment of the trial court does not suffer from any illegalities and infirmities. Therefore, they dismissed the appeal. So, holding that DD recorded by the magistrate is correct in all aspects. So, in another judgment reported in 1998 Part 2 Crimes, 1998 Part 2 Crimes, page 254. This is a case pertaining to Ram Bihari Yadav versus State of Bihar, Ram Bihari Yadav versus State of Bihar. In this case, the peculiar facts of this case is that the magistrate who recorded the dying declaration did not record in the form of question and answers. Rather, he recorded this dying declaration in the form of narration. He did not record the dying declaration in the form of question and answers. Rather, he recorded the dying declaration in the narrative form. And there is also no certificate by the doctor with regard to the mental fitness of the deceased. So, this evidence was sought to be attacked. This declaration was sought to be attacked on these two aspects. The one aspect is that there is no certificate of the doctor with regard to the fitness of the declarant, and that the declaration was not recorded in the question and answer form, rather it was recorded in the narration form. So disbelieving, so the ED has to be rejected. But what the court said, that there is evidence of magistrate. There is evidence of magistrate to the effect that he has put some questions to the victim, and through the answers he has come to subjective satisfaction that the declarant was in a fit state of mind to give declaration. And there is evidence of magistrate that in spite of his efforts he could not find a duty doctor prior to his recording his declaration. Therefore, what the court held, that in spite of the infirmities, they cannot throw away the evidentiary value of dying declaration, and still the dying declaration recorded by the magistrate is correct. So this is one judgment. In another judgment, in 1997 Part 1 Crimes page 62, in another judgment reported in 1997 Part 1 Crimes page 62, relating to State of Rajasthan versus Bupram, State of Rajasthan versus Bupram. In this case, the facts in brief are that the deceased Chawli was admitted into a hospital after receiving bullet injury due to the accused, her husband accused, shooting her with a pistol. And while she was in the hospital, the magistrate was summoned to record the dying declaration. And in that particular case, the victim